Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is January 9th, 2025, and let's get to the news and map updates happening in Ukraine and Russia, shall we? First of all, big thank you for sticking around. I am officially back from the holidays. I took some time off just to recharge my batteries, and I hope you did as well, that you had a good time during the holidays, and I'm wishing you guys a happy 2025. So I am back making regular updates, looking forward for this year, and very excited for all the new projects that I'm going to be doing this year, and including making constant and regular updates for you guys. So today is going to be exclusively a discussion about the map changes in the last few weeks, a few notes that I have regarding Russian losses, and also the silver lining behind what's going on right now in the Pokrovsk, Donbass area, because unfortunately Russia still is able to continue advancing very slowly with limited gains, but we're seeing that the trend continues to be that Russia is gaining ground, especially around the Pokrovsk area where they still have momentum. So let's talk about Pokrovsk. Very few changes around the area of Pokrovsk. However, the biggest one, something that was expected, and I've talked about it, is really Kurakhove. Since December 20th, the Russians continue pushing through Kurakhove, and they have officially taken this city of about 20,000 people prior to the war. And you see now that, as I've mentioned in my previous updates, that Russia is looking to align this front line, and then they're not too far away, a few kilometers away from Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. So this is the new oblast that the Russians are aiming for, but before they push through Dnipropetrovsk, they want to take Pokrovsk, which will be a very big endeavor for the Russians, because the harder they push, the more they push, the more losses they have, and the closer the Russians are to complete military degradation. We'll talk about it because there's a few facts and numbers I want to provide you guys. So the silver lining behind all these recent gains by the Russians is that they're being degraded heavily. We're also seeing that in the eastern side of Pokrovsk, the Russians have made some limited gains around Toretsk. There's heavy urban battles still ongoing in Toretsk, and unfortunately Toretsk is just a huge city of rubble. Unfortunately, the Russians have brought the entire city down with artillery, with bombs, with drones, and it's very difficult to defend an urban area when there is no urban area anymore, and it's just all flattened by the Russians. So they continue with the pressure on the east side as well, because the other goal is, of course, Konstantinivka, and taking control over this road that leads into Kramatorsk and Slavyansk, which are the two largest remaining cities in Donbass, in the Donetsk Oblast specifically. So I want to talk about the numbers, because you guys can see, yes, Russia is gaining ground, but one thing I want to mention first is about 2 weeks ago, Cover Cabal came out with a video, and it's a great channel that analyzes what Russia has in its tank storage facilities in Russia. And basically, long story short, his latest video indicates that Russia has about 3,000 tanks left in storage, of which he believes, along his colleagues, which are analyzing satellite imagery from Russian tank storage bases, of which they believe 1,500 are in okay condition to be restored and then sent to Ukraine. And again, these are very old Soviet tanks, T-55s, T-62s, T-72s, very few T-80s, and there's no more T-90s left in storage. So that really tells you that Russia is running out severely. And if we're taking into consideration, conservatively speaking, about 10 tank losses per day for the Russian military, then they'll run out entirely by the end of fall 2025 of this year. They'll run out completely out of tanks to restore. And we know that Russia does not have they can't produce tanks from the ground up, right? They completely rely on old Soviet tanks in storage to refurbish them, modernize them, and then send them to the front line. They cannot produce their own tanks anymore. Look at the T-14 Armata project being scrapped by the Russians a few years ago, because they simply realized that they cannot produce tanks from the ground up. So that is one silver lining. Another thing I want to mention is that even yesterday I saw a video that was shared by I think the Ukrainian forces, and they showcased another Russian squad, or maybe platoon-sized Russian convoy, exclusively driving on dirt bikes, Chinese golf carts, and Ural trucks, which had big metal plates welded on the truck itself. So it was kind of a Mad Max style video reminding me of the movie. But that is the reality, is that there is a critical shortage within the Russian military of armored vehicles, decent armored vehicles, whether it be tanks or BMPs or MTLBs or BTRs. Russia is simply running out of it, and it's being felt, and the Ukrainian military is confirming that. So the harder the Russians push, the harder they're trying to gain ground, the more catastrophic the erosion of the Russian military becomes. Additionally, I want to talk about the drone production, because today Zelensky announced that he's planning to increase even more the drone production. We know that in 2024, Zelensky confirmed that in last year they were able to produce around 1.5 million drones of different types, whether it be reconnaissance, FPV drones, long-range drones. So Ukraine overshot its expectations of 1 million, because I remember last year in January, Zelensky mentioned, or I think it was end of 2023, Zelensky mentioned that he wants to produce 1 million drones by the end of 2024. And it's been confirmed that Ukraine produced over 1.5 million drones. So now Ukraine is expected to produce 3 million drones in 2025, which is a very realistic number, something that people thought was a pipe dream. But we can see that Ukraine is working really hard and has been very efficient at producing different types of drones. Just look at the different announcements in the last few months of the different types of drones that Ukraine has been able to make and innovate on. And this can be noticed because I've shared with you guys yesterday the images of the Engels airfield. Now, close to the Engels airfield, there's an oil depot which the Ukrainians struck with long-range drones. And they did that 2 days ago. They struck it again a day later. And this massive oil depot, which is used as a refueling facility for the jet fighters, is a complete loss. The firefighters cannot take control of the fire under control. Some of them have died. And it can be noticed because now it's on a daily basis. Like just today alone, again, the Ukrainians struck, I believe it was a poultry farm in Kursk Oblast that produces meat and likely eggs for the domestic production of eggs in Russia. And then another drone strike, I believe it was in Belgorod Oblast today. So Ukraine is doing this on a daily basis now, where in the early phase of 2024, Ukraine was able to do this maybe 2-3 times per week. Now Ukraine is capable of doing this on a daily basis. That's really significant, meaning that Ukraine can match what Russia is currently doing against Ukraine, because we know that Russia is also launching its own drone strikes, missile strikes on a daily basis. Now Ukraine can match the same level of intensity against Russia and bring the war closer and closer to the Russian front line, which is really, really important. So that's another significant development, which is positive for Ukraine. And I also need to talk about AFB glide bombs, because remember that they still are, but they were a very big problem in the summer and fall of last year. Russia was using it indiscriminately. And before Ukraine got the permission of using these medium range missiles from the United States and its other partners with the Storm Shadows and the Scalps, Ukraine was having a really big problem with shutting them down, and also the F-16s that were in there yet. So Ukraine had no real answer at shutting down these glide bombs. But thankfully, with all the permissions that were made in the last few months, and Ukraine now having new capabilities, F-16 jet fighters, and of course medium-range drones and missiles now available in the Ukrainian military, there's been a significant reduction of usage of the AFB glide bombs. And as a matter of fact, the number is 70% reduction since the summer of 2024. So that's really significant, because that also reduces Russia's ability to push forward, because we know what the Russian what their strategy is bomb the hell out of urban areas, like they did with Toretsk, like they did with Avdiivka, like they did with Bakhmut, and then slowly start pushing with small squads continuously to gain ground. But with the reduction of AFB glide bombs, with the reduction of artillery systems, additionally, I want to mention that North Korea has been transferring its artillery systems to Russia. The Koksan self-propelled artillery have been seen in Donbass now, the 170 millimeter artillery systems. So Russia is relying more and more on North Korea. And everything is just pointing at the fact that the Russian military is degrading before our eyes. And by the end of this year, unless China and North Korea step in heavily with their own tanks and giving them hundreds of tanks to Russia, Russia is going to be fully degraded, and they're not going to have any more capabilities of pushing in Ukraine. And, you know, even the idea of getting to Kramatorsk will be a very costly one for the Russians. So that's the silver lining. But of course, Ukraine's biggest disadvantage is manpower. Ukraine is simply not able to match the manpower that Russia has and its ability. You can see that it's harder to replace the losses on the Ukrainian side. Millions of Ukrainians have fled the country since 2022. Many of them are also demoralized because there is a poor rotation of troops on the Ukrainian side. This is both because of the structure, the way the system is set up, and also because of the manpower shortage as well. So that's the issue with Ukraine, is that's what we're seeing in the areas where Ukraine doesn't have its strong defenses. It clearly cannot control the situation the way it wants to. But that is why Ukraine is shifting to a more drone, robotics type of warfare, or being supported by drones and robots, because it realizes that there's no other way. They need to increase the kill-death ratio to their advantage, right? And a drone pilot can easily kill 4 to 5 Russian soldiers per day, compared to an infantryman, which, you know, the numbers are likely to be much smaller, the kill-to-death ratio for an infantryman. So Ukraine is trying to increase its production of drones, increase its production or the development of drone pilots, although you still need infantrymen. It's not like drone pilots will completely replace infantrymen. You still need soldiers on the ground. So that's what Ukraine is betting on more and more in 2025, is going towards a more modernized, more better equipped with more drones, a military that is better equipped with more drones. So that's my observations, and why I believe that in 2025, Ukraine will be able to stabilize the situation around Pokrovsk and the entire line in Donbass. But, you know, Russia is not going to stop at their objective with taking Pokrovsk and Kramatorsk, because we know that their mentality is, of course, a mentality of a one-way ticket of I'm dying for my Tsar, and the motherland is going to respect me because of that. So they don't care about their losses, and they're going to continue pushing. So that's the situation with Avdiivka and Pokrovsk area. Additionally, I want to talk about briefly about Kursk, because we did mention earlier this week that Ukraine launched a small counteroffensive. It felt like it was something bigger, but in the north of Sudzha, around the area of Berdyn, the Ukrainians launched a small little counteroffensive. You can see this entire area is in gray, so it's unclear whether Ukraine controls it or not, but they took advantage of likely poor Russian rotation of troops, a weak defense in this area to break through and take up positions around this area. So just to give you an update, this was not a new counteroffensive of a massive scale. It was just the Ukrainian troops taking an opportunity to seize back some territory and destabilize the Russian troops here. Additionally, we also need to be realistic with the fact that Russia in the last few months has been able to reinforce this entire area, and so having a breakthrough here would be very difficult unless you concentrate tens of thousands of troops, which Ukraine unfortunately doesn't have the luxury of right now. So this is just basically was a small counteroffensive to seize the opportunity and take up positions around the area of Berdyn, which is still a positive development. But either way, Russia continues pushing here along with North Korean troops. And by the way, one news articles mentioned today that Kim Jong-un is also assisting Russia with his own troops here because he wants to gain experience. He wants his troops, his soldiers to gain experience from the battlefield conditions. And so this is to the detriment, of course, of South Korea and other Asian countries close to North Korea right now, including Japan. So something to be wary about. So that's why I believe that South Korea and Japan should be providing far more military assistance to allow the Ukrainians to defeat not only the Russian troops, but now the North Korean troops in Kursk. And who knows, maybe in the future, some of these North Korean troops are going to be transferred in Donbass. But more or less, the good news is that Russia's had very, very limited gains over the last 2-3 weeks during the holidays. Yes, they have taken Kurakhove, but that was expected. I've talked about it. And you can see that their new goal right now is towards taking Pokrovsk within the spring of 2025, but that will come at great cost for the Russians, and they'll be completely degraded and eroded by the end of this year. With the numbers I've provided you, that Russia has about 1,500 tanks left in storage, and they're simply not able of dropping as many bombs, glide bombs, as they could previously. As a matter of fact, speaking of glide bombs, yesterday Russia accidentally bombed itself twice in Belgorod. I believe north of Belgorod, 2 glide bombs fell because, again, this speaks volumes. Russia's afraid of flying their jet fighters close to the front line, and so they're, dropping these bombs much further away, and they're miscalculating. And so these bombs are dropping much earlier than they should, and they're now bombing their own cities in Belgorod and other oblasts within Russia. So this is the update for you guys, the map update. I'm glad to be back. I hope you guys enjoyed this update. And one last thing I want to mention before I end this video, another great innovation by the Ukrainians over the holidays that we saw was the unmanned sea vessels that were able to shut down 3 Russian helicopters over the Black Sea. And the Russians are sounding a panic alarm right now because they mentioned that they don't have an answer to this anymore. Because we know that the Ukrainians were not as effective before that because the Russians were using helicopters to destroy these unmanned sea vessels that were attacking Sevastopol, the port of Novorossiysk, Kerch, and the bridge itself. And now, because the Ukrainians installed air defense systems over these USV vessels, now they're able to shoot down these helicopters. And so Russia is not able to defend the Black Sea anymore. So Ukraine reestablished its dominance over the Black Sea in a matter of a few days. So this is very significant because we can expect over the coming weeks more Ukrainian attacks over Russian ports, and that's really significant. Additionally, these unmanned sea vessels can also now carry FPV drones. So the Ukrainians are able to launch these unmanned sea vessels. They can float around close to the Crimea Peninsula, and then they can launch drones out of them and hit specific military targets in Crimea, in the Caucasus of Russia, and other areas in occupied territory in Ukraine. So some more innovation by the Ukrainians, and you're seeing that the Ukrainians are shifting towards a more modern and more drone-dependent military to save lives and answer the critical shortage of manpower that Ukraine currently faces, which is really the biggest issue that Ukraine has right now. So let me know, guys, in the comment section what you think about any of the things I talked about today. But I'm wishing you a good start of the year. A huge thank you for your support of this channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Slava Ukraini!